There we go.
Can you hear me? We're having some audio issues, but I think we got it. So just pop there in the chat and let me know if you can hear me. Hopefully you can. Hey, Andrea in Oklahoma. Andrea, I used to live in Oklahoma. I was a little tiny thing. I lived in Norman, Oklahoma. My dad was in pharmacy school. And my biggest memory from Oklahoma is just being terrified of tornadoes. Because they would go over the school, and as a kindergartner, the sound that they would make, and everybody, worried about them, it was just super, super scary. So I'm sure that when you live in Oklahoma full time, it's just a normal day. But for me, as a kindergartner, it was quite scary. And there was also a giant big bird in my kindergarten room, like a massive big bird. But looking back, it was probably only like 4 foot tall. I just, as a kindergartner, felt like it was a massive big bird. So it was like up on a pedestal and everything. Anyway, I wonder where they got the big bird. Elizabeth from Tacoma, Washington. Oh, good. And Barbara in New Hampshire. Fabulous. All right, and I feel like okay, good, I can see everybody.
We're on Facebook too.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm in our Clubhouse group, so if there's questions that come in on another page, I don't have that page.
YouTube.
What?
YouTube.
YouTube. So if there's questions that come in YouTube, if you could let me know what those are, Brad, because I have our Facebook Clubhouse page up. But I'm not able to see the YouTube if there's questions that come in from YouTube. Andrea, house on a hill in McAllister. That sounds lovely, and one hasn't landed on you yet. All right, Andrea, go knock on some wood though, because as soon as you say that, all right, and Barbara. All right, well, good. Everybody can hear me. Sorry about the little late start. We're just getting going. If you have a question that you want to chat about, put it there in the comment section, and we've got folks who are monitoring both, so we'll figure out and we'll get your questions answered. Brad, are there folks on YouTube that are saying hello?
It doesn't look like they can hear.
That they can?
They cannot.
On YouTube they cannot hear? All kinds of fun things today.
I think you're good.
Okay, so on YouTube, y'all can hear on YouTube? All right. We're getting ourselves together. I appreciate your patience on this pretty afternoon. Hopefully it's pretty where you are. I think it's like it's supposed to get up to 70 today in Kentucky, so nice day. All right, so we've got some questions that are coming in. Elizabeth says, how to best choose a quilting pattern when it's log cabin and stars. So Elizabeth, one of the things that I like to do as I'm bopping around the internet and just kind of not when I have a quilt kind of staring me down and I gotta decide what to put on it right that second. But just as I'm bopping through the internet, if there's a quilt that I see that I go, that's kind of cool, like anything that makes me stop and look at it a little longer, that's telling me that I'm appreciating something about it. And so what I will do is I will actually pull that into a program I use that's called Evernote. And Evernote is a free program. Once you reach a certain tier level, they do charge for it after you reach a certain memory level. It took me about 3 years to hit that memory level. And I just, it's kind of like my own personal Pinterest, but you could do this on Pinterest as well. And just start a collection of log cabin quilts that are pretty to you. And I would say that, probably you want log cabin quilts that are pretty to you, that are the pieced part of it is what is interesting to you, and another one that is more of the quilting part that's interesting to you. If you find a photo of some quilting on a particular kind of quilt, and just start to collect those so that you have a little pile of quilts that you think are awesome, and maybe it's like a flying geese, I know I have a collection of flying geese designs that quilting motifs that I've run across throughout the years that I think, that was kind of interesting, and then kind of branch off from what I see and kind of make it my own, but have a launching off point. I think the scary part when you're trying to decide about what goes on a quilt is if you don't have kind of a backstock of things to pull from, some place to go, okay, of all the Lone Star quilts I've seen over the years, these are the ones that I've thought are pretty cool, and that might give you a place, a leaping off place to pull from to figure out what would go on a quilt top. So you can do that with Pinterest. You can even do it on Pinterest. You can make private boards on Pinterest, so they're just your own personal collection vessel. I like Evernote because I can actually use the same note, the same screen grab, and tag it with multiple different words. So maybe it's log cabin, and maybe it's stars, and maybe it's feathers, and maybe it's strip piecing. And so then I can kind of mix and match and sort in the future based on what I have sitting in front of me. So don't think that I know that one of the most popular things for our clubhouse is the portion where we have a quilt and I show you how I quilt it if it were my quilt. Please know that I don't like walk into Clubhouse 2 minutes before we go live and just like pull it out of my head. Like, there is thought process involved, and the thought process is going to my bank of ideas and kind of pulling out and teasing out what I think might look good, and then auditioning that on the quilt. And you can audition it by drawing on the quilt, on a photo, in your computer. You could even put down some thick template plastic, like quilter's vinyl, and with a wet erase marker, draw right there on your quilt to kind of get a sense of if what you think is going to look good on your quilt. And then my new favorite way is to take big sheets, and I mean big sheets, a big old roll. I think it's like a 48-inch long roll of high quality cellophane. So not the cellophane that rips easy, but the thicker stuff. And I will actually, on my long arm frame, pull out a sheet of that cellophane and then use with a light touch a Sharpie and draw on that cellophane. So that's why I use a really long piece of cellophane, a 48-inch long piece of cellophane. It's so that it's so big that I don't have the option. I can't accidentally draw off the edge of the cellophane. So start to collect what you find interesting. One thing, it'll tell you what your style is. Like I'm sure that if I asked you, Andrea, what is your style of quilting? That it might take you a second and go, well, I'm not really all that sure. If you start to collect the things you think are cool, your style of quilting will reveal itself. And it's one of those just kind of getting to know yourself and what is it that you like? What is it that you think is cool? And that'll kind of clue you into your style and what you enjoy. So, all right, we got Columbus, Ohio. And all right, and so Andrea, you asked, how do you decide on your color themes? Andrea, are you asking about like the color thread that I use, or are you asking about or are you asking more about the colors for piecing patterns? So just clarify that, and I'll see if I can help you. Oh, it was Elizabeth who asked about log cabin. Sorry, I think I called her Andrea. Okay, so Andrea's gonna just clarify that about how do you decide on color themes, if that's piecing or quilting. Was there any questions on YouTube, Brad?
Terry wants to know, where do
Hey,
you
Terry.
purchase 84-inch cellophane?
So the 48-inch cellophane, the roll of it, I just got it on Amazon, but it'll show you the millimeter thickness and go thick, because you don't want the kind that rips easy. You're gonna pay a little more than you would. Don't look for the cheaper one on the list. Look for one that's thicker, and you're gonna pay a little more for it, and get that 48-inch roll. And by the way, I learned that method. I didn't invent it. I learned that method from Claudia Feil. I was fortunate enough to be invited to teach in Dusseldorf, Germany, at Claudia Feil's studio over there. And one of the things that she likes to do is use that super thick, high quality cellophane and draw on it. And it was just like a light bulb moment. I was like, oh my goodness, that's so simple and easy and fast. And one of the things that I like to do is like pull out a sheet of that cellophane and draw, and then pull out another sheet of cellophane and draw, and layer them. And then I can go through and I can go, okay, take out this one layer, take out this middle layer because I don't like that design, and pull out another sheet of cellophane and lay it on top. So it's all see-through, so you can kind of build blocks with borders, with sashing, and audition and play in the same way that I do on a screen if I'm drawing on a photo in my computer. It's just the analog version of it is all. and it works really well. So hopefully that is helpful. Yeah, Kim says she uses a piece of plexiglass with dry erase markers. Super common. I would caution you though, Kim. I would caution you in that dry erase markers, if your hand brushes over it, it'll pick up on your palm and you can transfer that to the quilt. So you might consider using wet erase markers on that plexiglass instead. And then you might consider putting a piece of painter's tape around all four edges of that piece of plexiglass. And that just gives your brain a visual barrier for where the plexiglass ends and your quilt begins, so you don't accidentally, draw on the quilt. That would be bad. So, okay. All right, so we did have a question that came through. Were there any other questions on YouTube? Okay, perfect. We did have a question that came through. Michelle asked, is there an easy method using invisible thread, and what kind or brand should I use? So, Michelle, for years and years and years, I used monopoly. So it's a polyester monofilament, a polyester invisible thread, and it comes in two colors. It comes in smoke and it comes in clear. And it runs really well on a long arm machine because it has a little bit of a stretch to it. So it can be very forgiving, as your thread path on a long arm machine is just especially brutal to any thread. It's just, we're gonna put that thread through a lot of abuse before it actually makes a stitch. So the monopoly is a great invisible thread. And we do have that on the website. I probably should pop that. I can pop it into the chat here, because we also have pre-wound of the monopoly as well for both L and M bobbins.
No.
Just L. Perfect. Thank you for the correction. So L bobbins. So I popped it in the chat there on Facebook, and perhaps Brad can pop it in the chat on YouTube. I'm not sure, because I don't have YouTube pulled up, so I'm not sure how that works. But anyway, so monopoly was my go-to. However, it does have a thickness to it, and it can pick up a little bit of light. And so then I kind of started, for my show quilts, moving over into a nylon monofilament. Now, nylon is a little more brittle than the polyester, but my show quilts aren't going in the dryer. They're not getting, washed and dried over and over again. They're not hanging in the sun. They're just hanging on a wall, basically. And so the nylon monofilament, we have one that's made by Filtech. It's called Essence. And it's on that page that I posted in the chat. We have all of our invisible threads on that page. And it's a little skinnier, so it doesn't catch the light quite as much. It's very popular with show quilters. But I'm telling you, Michelle, my favorite right now is actually, it's Micro Quilter. And that's a Superior Thread product. It's a 100-weight thread. Let me grab the link and I'll put that in the chat. But our Micro Quilter thread, there's a particular color, and I love that they named it, it's the 007 color. So it blends into everything. It's like a little ninja color that kind of blends into everything. And I'll put that in the chat there. And so the Micro Quilter, what's great about it is because it's so skinny that as you go around Sunbonnet Sue, if you cross over her toe, it won't yell at you from across the room that you've just cut her toe off. It's just, it sinks down into the fibers of the fabric and is super forgiving. It's so skinny, it doesn't reflect the light. I just really love that thread, and will pull it before I would pull a monopoly or a nylon monofilament. So if you haven't tried Micro Quilter, pop that 007, I think it's called Canvas, if I'm not mistaken.
It's called Silver.
Silver, okay, thank you. Oh, okay, I don't see it on here, Kelsey. Oh, did I put in the Masterpiece instead of Micro Quilter? Oh, I did. Okay, hold on, I screwed up. I put in see, this is what I get for trying to talk and copy links all at the same time. I accidentally put in to the chat Micro Masterpiece and not Micro Quilter. So here, I'm gonna fix it. Here it comes. Okay, Micro Quilter. I apologize for that. The Masterpiece thread is great for piecing, but don't use it to go around Sunbonnet Sue. If you cut her toe off, you'll see it from across the room. So use the micro quilter, and I think you'll like it a lot. And Elizabeth asked, what do I use in the bobbin? So I can certainly wind monopoly or the micro quilter in the bobbin if I so choose, but I love my pre-wounds. If I'm working on an L bobbin machine, I could use the pre-wound monopoly, but I'm more likely to just go with an 80 weight deco bob in my bobbin because it's so skinny that it'll just melt into the whatever invisible thread I'm running on the top or whatever skinny thread I'm running on the top. And I would just try to kind of stay in that same canvasy color, that same kind of taupey color. That kind of blends into everything, but I'm a huge fan right now of 80 weight thread in the bobbin, the pre-wound deco bobs. We've been using that a lot with our renters here, and they're plastic sided pre-wound bobbins. We also sell it in the cones, so maybe I should drop that in as well into the chat, because if you haven't tried the deco bobs, do try it, because we have it in both the L's and the M's. If you're looking for a pre-wound, if you're on your domestic sewing machine, you could get it in a cone and wind it yourself. So I'll pop that in there. So Patricia says, I've always heard that you should not use invisible thread in the bobbin. So Patricia, the problem is that if you wind your own bobbin with invisible thread, it's kind of like an inflatable life raft off of a boat. Like as soon as you stop winding, the whole bobbin goes, and if you overwind it, when it takes that breath, it'll kind of blah, 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 blah off the sides. So you have to be cautious if you're winding your own bobbin to not wind it all the way, to wind it more like halfway or 3/4 of the way, because just remember, the whole thing's going to take a breath when you're done winding, and you don't want it to kind of spill off the sides. But as far as the, is it kosher to run, a monofilament top and bottom? Yeah, knock yourself out. There's no reason that it would be a problem. It's just when you wind it yourself, you can overwind it, and it'll spill off once you release the tension of the bobbin winder that you're working with. So hopefully that is clear. And Patricia, by the way, we all have to be careful. I have very little room in my life for the quilt police. We all have to be careful that what we hear about something works for you or doesn't work for you. So, I when I'm on Facebook and the internet and stuff, I see people who are like, oh, you're having this problem, you should do this. And in my head, I'm like, no, that's, try it for yourself before you give up on it. So just be cautious. I know you know this, Patricia, but not everything on the internet is true. So we just want to make sure that what you read and what you hear, that you kind of, does it make sense to you? Is it validated from people that you trust? And have you tried it yourself, really, is what I would say. Okay, and so there was that question from Andrea about colors, and I don't see that Andrea said something else about that. Were there any other questions on YouTube? Okay, and then Melissa, she says, should I always load a project to be quilted in the center of my leaders? Okay, so she's using a stand-up machine, and she's thinking of smaller practice projects and having her leaders relax evenly. She says that she just finished putting together her APQS Millie. Congratulations, Lisa. She put it together today, and she's ready to start. So if you're on a stand-up machine, you will be pinning or snapping 2 canvas leaders, and some brands have canvas leaders that are thicker, and some, like, meatier is the word I guess I should use, and others are more relaxed leader. And so as you pin over time, depending on the meatiness of the canvas, it'll stretch out more quickly than others, but it will stretch out. Like, you will get to the point where your leaders are overstretched. And it's because you've just pinned and pinned over and over and stretched the fabric between the 2 bars over and over so many times that you will stretch your leaders out over time. So your instinct is spot on in that if you can change where you load across your frame, then you will, more evenly spread out your leaders. Now, let's think about the problem with that. So the problem with that is if you have a loading method where you like to find the center of your back and pin it to the center of your leader, and then find the center of your take-up bar and pin the center of your back to that leader, it's going to throw you if you try to move the backing fabric to one side or the other of center. So if your loading method that you prefer to use is to find your center and pin from the center out, then this probably won't be a great idea for you, because you're going to get kind of lost of like, well, how do I match the center to the center of the leader if suddenly I'm loading to the left of center? But if you are like me, where you do not do that, where you instead, what I do is on my stand-up machine, I load to the belly bar, however it's laying there, whatever makes sense, wherever I want to be. It doesn't matter, I just put it on there wherever it makes sense to me. And then I throw the backing fabric off the take-up bar and let it kind of spill over and waterfall over the back of the machine. And then as I roll that backing fabric up onto the belly bar, that whole backing fabric will shift and find its own little happy center. And then once it has risen up off the floor, risen up off the table, and is even with that take-up bar canvas, then I'll go to the back and pin, because it has found its own little happy center. So just, I would say, Melissa, more than anything, you just got a long arm machine, yeah? You're not really sure where the forests are for the trees, so give yourself a little grace and forgiveness. There's a lot to learn. If you got a APQS machine, you got a full day class included with the purchase of your machine, so make sure that you take that class. We are offering it here. If you would like to take the class from me, we are offering that class here on December, oh goodness, Kelsey, the 3rd. So that's a Friday, and we are offering it on Zoom in December. So if you are in Timbuktu, you can still take that class. And if you're interested in taking that class, but you don't have an APQS machine, or perhaps you have an APQS machine, but you bought it from a private individual, or you bought it more than a year ago, then you can just pop that class into your cart on our website. And I should probably, oh, you got it. Oh, thank you, Kelsey. So you can go to that bit.ly link and you can pop it into your cart, and it's a $200 class. It's a full day class, and then we record that class as well, so you can access it for up to a month later. I will say though, if you have bought recently an APQS machine from a dealer, from a store, from APQS directly, your student fees for that class come with your purchase. APQS actually pays your student fees for that purchase. For that class. So if you are interested in joining me for that class, for that APQS beginning long arm class on December the 3rd, it goes from 10 a.m. Eastern to 4 p.m. Eastern. Just send in an email to us at support@quiltedjoy.com, and then we just go on the back end with APQS and get the needed credentials so that we can send you the link, and then you can join me in that class. So more than anything, Melissa, I just want to make sure that you have access to education so that you can learn and kind of see all the different ways to load a quilt on a frame, because there are so many different ways to load a quilt on a frame. And so in that class, we'll talk about, multiple ways. So, and if you have a different brand, long arm machine, I would just question your dealer and ask if there's education that comes with your purchase. More than likely there is. Each brand does it differently, each dealer does it differently. So do inquire about it, but if you didn't get the education that you want with your long arm machine, you can always take that APQS beginners class from me, and we'll chat, and we do and on Zoom with multiple cameras so that you can see close-ups of what I'm doing. You can ask questions. There's a bunch of downloadable resources that I give you with that class. So you can either pay to take the class, or if you've bought an APQS machine last year from a dealer or store or APQS directly, we can get you in that class free. So support@quiltedjoy.com. Okay. Amanda, some of the stitching, edge-to-edge, hand-guided panto on my last 2 quilts has become loose after being trimmed. Is there a way to prevent this? So I'm presuming, Amanda, that you are talking about stitching that's on the far left or right of your quilt, where you would trim the quilt to put your binding on. And so I see that happen with super slippery threads. Glide is a slippery thread, Fantastico and Magnifico and Affinity. There's others out there, but if it's a slippery thread, it can come undone a little bit on those outside edges when you trim your quilt. So you have two choices of how to prevent that from happening. One would be before you roll your quilt forward. So you typically, you roll your quilt forward, you baste on the left, you baste on the right, you quilt the middle. You roll the quilt forward, you baste the left, you baste the right, you quilt the middle. So if you run another line of stitching before you roll forward, so you've basted left, you've basted right, you've quilted through the middle, and then baste again left and right, it will nail down those ends so that they won't unravel when you go to trim. Okay, so that's one choice. Another choice could be if you actually go ahead and apply the binding before you trim it. All right, so we would be talking about applying it to the front with the backing and the batting, the excess backing and batting still there. Go ahead and apply your binding to the front and then trim it. It'll prevent that from happening. Now, if I haven't understood the question, Amanda, and what you're asking is that in the center of the quilt, your stitching is coming undone, then that's a sign of poor tension. So generally it's a sign that you need to increase your top tension, but I don't think that's what you're asking. I think you're asking about the two sides of the quilt. Okay, so Andrea clarified her question. She says, I'm curious about how people come up with the fabrics they piece with and have a color theme. Andrea, one of the cool little shortcuts you might take is a walk through the grocery. Think about all of the products in the grocery aisle that have big time graphic designers hired by all those companies who have done all kinds of education and research on color theory, and they have chosen the colors for the cereal box and the granola box and the coffee bag. I mean, they have gone through so much color theory classes and education that they're able to pull complementary colors together quite easily. And so it's kind of fun if you like find a quilt or find a Payday candy bar is what comes to mind, because I did a quilt with this theory where my guild actually, it was a candy bar challenge, and everybody had to select a candy bar and then use the colors from the wrapper of the candy bar in their quilt. So then the colors are chosen for you, and they're chosen by somebody with a super big brain. And so the colors that were chosen were a Payday candy bar. So think about a Payday candy bar. There's a lot of white, there's some orange, there's some brown, and it looked beautiful, and I didn't have to stress about the colors. I just looked at the grocery store to do the hard work for me. Of course, another thing you can do is you can always, if you find a pretty focal fabric, is look at the selvage. Because on the selvage, they will print all of the colors that are made in the actual print, and you can pull from those. And so then you rely on the big brain of the fabric designer who knows how colors, go together and work. So it just, as you get more comfortable pulling colors, you'll start to pull colors together yourself. But those would be the two kind of crutches I would use from the get-go. Do we have any other questions on YouTube?
No, Terry suggested Campbell's soup is a good color combination.
Campbell's soup, yeah. So Terry says Campbell's soup. So that would be reds and whites and black, and I think there's a little yellow in there. I actually just did a quilt. I'm trying to think if we've got it on our blog yet. It was on the Fonz and Porter show, and it's about my kids. So all three kids graduated from college this year. I have triplets, and they all graduated. And I wanted to make a quilt for each of them with their school colors. And so that's what I did. Nicholas, he graduated from the University of Louisville, so I have a red and black with a little touch of white and then a pop of gold, because U of L they're the Cardinals, and so the beak of the cardinal is that gold color. And so I just pulled from their school colors to pull it in and make a quilt out of it. And calendar artwork, yeah. Just look for where all the big brains, all the big graphic designers make things, and then pull those colors out. Elizabeth says, I took your online class years ago. Would this Zoom class give new ideas and info? So the online class you took years ago, I'm presuming, Elizabeth, you are talking about the Long Arm Fundamentals class that I taught through Quilting Daily, which is the parent company for Fonz and Porter. That's the only online class that comes to mind that I had years ago. And so I would say that a lot of that information would be similar. So I would not recommend that you take the online class we were just talking about. If you had taken the, if I'm correct, if you are mentioning the long arm fundamentals class, which is a 13-hour class that I did for Quilting Daily, and I want to say they sell it for $400-ish, $500-ish dollars. I think that you got loads of info in there. But if you haven't taken that class and you'd like to spend $200 on the APQS beginners class, certainly sign up. Again though, if you've bought an APQS machine recently from a dealer, a store, or APQS directly, then that class may be free to you and you can come and hang out with me in class and not have to pay anything. We just need to get all that clearance done through APQS. Okay. So Karen, what is your favorite batting for machine quilting a large quilt? So Karen, here at the shop, we go through Hobbs 80/20 like water. I really like a blend. I like a poly cotton blend. We've used a 70/30 blend, which is also wonderful. I'm not a big fan of cotton batting. In my experience, cotton batting kind of overshrinks and it's a little flatter, and it kind of diminishes my hard work. It kind of gives me that Pottery Barn shabby chic crinkly look, and I want something that doesn't have as much over shrinkage and it lifts up into the quilting lines to show off all my hard work. So that's why I prefer a poly cotton blend. We do have here in the shop, we sell it's a Quilter's Dream 100% cotton. It's not their Request Loft. So their Request Loft is the super thin, it's the baseline loft. It's two above that. We sell the Deluxe Loft. So it's a much thicker weight cotton batting. And it's super popular with our modern quilters. It does give you that over shrinkage, but it's got a little weight to it as well. Like the quilt has a little heft to it. It's very, very popular with our modern quilters. My personal favorite though is some kind of blend, like a cotton poly blend. Okay, so Amanda says some of this, oh no, we've already done that one. Okay, sorry. Chris, she said, trying to stitch a large quilt on the long arm with diagonal stitches spaced an inch apart. It's been challenging. Yes, that would be challenging. Do you have any recommendations for a good way to make sure it remains lined up? What you're doing is super hard, Chris, and I'll tell you why here in a second. She says, I tried doing it in each area using rulers. That's a great idea. The piece came off the frame and all those crooked stitches have been removed. I'm not sure what the crooked stitches were. She's asking, should I mark the entire top off the frame and then hang it again? What's the best marking method? And your suggestion to use glide thread has worked really well. I thank you for that every time I stitch. Oh, that's sweet, Chris. Thank you. So, Chris, what you are doing is challenging. And the difficulty, the problem that you're encountering is fabric draw up. So as we put more stitches into our quilt sandwich, the whole thing is going to kind of sink up and suck up, and so it's going to be hard every time you advance to keep things aligned. And I'm talking about you're doing it by hand, but it's the same thing if you're doing it by computer. You're going to be fighting the same fabric drop, and it is super hard. So yes, you could take the time to go ahead and mark the whole shebang. My cheeky answer to you would be pick a different pattern. Like there are so many patterns out there that you could put on your quilt that aren't going to give you anxiety and pain. So don't choose the painful one. Go choose one that gives you the look without the pain. And so what comes to mind to me is there's a really great pattern, pantograph out there called Diagonal Plaid, that kind of gives you that crosshatch look, but it's not so stinking hard. But what you're talking about is difficult. So if my back was the wall and I had to do what you're talking about, I'm thinking using the piecing to give me the guidelines. Of course, the caveat to that is that the piecing needs to be done well, right? So that you're not having one block that's 12 inches and one block that's 11 3/4 inches and one block that's 12 1/4 inches, because that's going to change all of that. So yes, you could, probably the safest thing would be to mark the whole stinking thing, but who wants to do that? So yeah, my cheeky answer would be find something else, because you're going to fight that fabric drop. And I don't, I'm doing this for fun. I didn't get into quilting to compete. I certainly didn't get into quilting to raise my anxiety level. So why choose something that's going to be, cause me to go rip out a whole section? That's just going to make me, physically hurt for the day. So I'm not sure that I answered you. But so best marking method, you might also, Chris, look at a stencil. We do have 1-inch grids and 2-inch grids, I think, that you could use a pounce pad and use that. But again, you're talking about a human who made the quilt, so some of the seams may not be accurate, so you may not have 12-inch blocks or 10-inch blocks. You may be working with a different size, which is going to change how those diagonal lines are going to read on the quilt top. So what you're doing is hard. All right, so what batting do I use for show quilts? So Patty, for show quilts, I will use wool batting, and wool is super pricey, but there's nothing that compares to it. It gives you almost a sculpted look. And so my show quilts are over quilted. They're super densely quilted. And what wool allows me to do is compress the kink of the wool down, and where it's overstitched, it'll lay nice and flat, but where I've not stitched it quite so much, the kink of the wool will rise up and come at the eye, and it'll give me a lot of dimensionality to the quilt. The other thing that wool batting does is that it doesn't remember fold lines. And so a lot of my show quilts, I had one that traveled in a box for 2 years. And so as it traveled, the wool won't remember the fold lines, whereas cotton batting will certainly remember your fold lines if it lives in a box. And by the way, all those show quilts that you see as you go to all these great quilt shows, as they're starting to come back to life, Patty, all of those show quilts are going to be wool batting, except for the aisle you walk down that is the hand quilters aisle, and because the hand quilters are cotton purists, and they're going to use cotton in their batting as well. And so when you walk down the hand quilting aisle, look at the fold lines and look at the dimensionality, because you'll notice the difference between a wool bat and a cotton bat. But I like wool, and I like to layer it with a second batting behind it, so 2 layers. So generally the batting that's behind the wool is some kind of blend, like an 80-20 or a cotton wool blend behind the wool. So if you think about, you've got your backing fabric, you would have your 80-20 or your cotton wool blend bat, and then your wool on top of that, and then your quilt top. All right, that's the sandwich, that's the layers. The wool goes against the quilt top, and the extra layer of batting goes against your quilt back. Okay, so Hillary says, hi Angela. Hey Hillary. She says, I'm really very new to long arm quilting and find so many issues overwhelming. So Hillary, totally normal. Give yourself some grace and forgiveness. We've got our lead quilt fairy here, her name is Melanie, and she likes to tell our renters, remember when a kiddo learns how to walk, they don't just take off running, they fall down and bang their nose and bang their toe, and it doesn't look so pretty for a little while until they eventually start to walk. So you're learning to walk, so give yourself a little bit of grace and forgiveness, because it can be overwhelming. So you are in a marathon, you are not in a sprint. Don't think that you are going to, master this in a month. Part of the joy of quilting, long arm quilting, machine quilting, piecing, part of the joy of quilting is that exploration of technique. It's seeing your abilities grow over time. It's learning new things. That's part of what we enjoy about quilting. So give yourself a little break, and I'm sure you're doing well, but I also understand that it can be overwhelming. I do understand that. And the way to combat that is education and things like we're doing here, where we just chat about what's on your mind. So she says, I have successfully wound bobbins, good, loaded a practice quilter too, perfect, and have completed a lot of doodling. Well, you are on your way. You're doing great. So how do you adjust from moving the quilt through a sit-down machine to moving the machine and standing? I have not found this ease as of yet, and thank you for great instructional videos. All right, Hillary, here's my thoughts about what's going on with you. Your brain, when it goes around a circle, especially a sit-down machine, you are using some gross motor skills, and your brain, as you go around that circle, is flipping from one side of your brain to the other. So one part of your circle is being driven by your dominant side, and the other side of the circle is being driven by your non-dominant side, and you're flipping back and forth. When you move to the long arm machine, one of the things that I see is, and the sign of this is squircles, so squared circles instead of circles, is that you're doing these circles and your brain is like, oh, I know how to do this. We're going to flip back and forth. Non-dominant, dominant, non-dominant, dominant, non-dominant, dominant. And what you wind up with is you haven't trained your brain to depend solely on the dominant side of your body to drive the bus, to drive the machine. So you need to work on training your brain to depend on your dominant side. And the best way I know to train your brain is to grab your machine's handle with your dominant side, your dominant hand. I'm right-handed, so I would grab it with my right hand. And then open up your non-dominant hand so that it's more of a rudder. It's not actually, you're not holding the handle, so it can't actually drive the bus. It's just kind of helping to guide it around curves. And it's helping to use the momentum of the machine around curves. And as you kind of train your brain to rely solely on that dominant side, you can eventually lower down and grab the handle with your non-dominant side, but you've trained your brain to only allow your dominant side to be in charge. If you watch competition quilters stitch, you will notice that many of them do not have their dominant hand on the handles at all. They have their non-dominant hand on the fabric and they have their dominant hand on the machine. So they're stitching with only one hand. And it's because they've trained their brain to just allow that dominant side, those gross motor skills, to just be on one side of their brain, the side that is used to driving the bus, even though they're going around a circle and crossing the midline. So try that and let me know if that helps you. And then you're doing great as far as loading a practice quilt and doing a lot of doodling. The other thing I would say is look at panels. We just got in a whole bunch of really great panels. There's one that we got in, it's by Riley Blake, it's called Exquisite. Let me see if I can find that. And I was so impressed with this panel because it has basically applique printed on the panel, and it makes it so easy to kind of use your machine and to go around different areas organically, and it would be a great little practice piece to kind of get to know your machine. So let me pop that into the chat. It's called Exquisite, and we actually are going to be kitting that up as well with an inner border and an outer border here soon, but we do have the panel up right now. And then the other panel that we got is called Tigerfly, and it is another really great panel. It's got some places to play with some negative space, but it also has printed butterflies that you can kind of train and use to trace around to help you learn more about how to guide the machine around curves and things. So look at panels in a whole different way, because there's a lot of great sandbox, a lot of great places to play and design with a panel. Patty says she rests her left hand on top of the machine when I do a pantograph, and I didn't know why until now. There you go, Patty. I actually stand to the side of my long arm machine when I'm using the handles in the back, and I hold one handle with two hands like a golf club. I feel like I have control because I can tuck my elbows into my waist and stand about hip width apart and use my whole body to move the machine, not just my shoulders. I prefer to hold it like that. I do have customers who will hold the rear handle with their right hand and put their left hand like on the take-up bar or on the actual machine frame. I mean, however it makes sense to you to hold that machine on the back where you feel like you're in control, go for it. But that probably is why you naturally went that way, Patty, is to let your dominant side drive the bus. Is there a question on YouTube?
Yeah, username Nooks and Crannies.
Nooks and Crannies, hey!
She's new to long arm quilting, but she's making a memory quilt with 12 photos that are 8 inches square. She's planning on doing an all over big stipple, but wants to know how to handle the photos, quilt on them or avoid those blocks.
Okay, so you have 8-inch blocks with photos, and you're asking, how do I approach those faces with my needle? No one likes stitches going through their face. Nobody does. So my recommendation to you would be to do a wide open meander. I would use a batting that has some meat to it, that you don't have to quilt so tightly. So like a polyester batting. If you think about what's going on with those printed photos, it's likely treated fabric anyway, so don't let that cotton purist that lives inside all of us get all bunched up about this. A polyester bat will allow you to stitch out further than you might normally be able to on a cotton bat. And I would go a wide open meander and I would go around the face, but I would avoid going through the face because it's just gonna, it's not gonna look right. We want to appreciate the faces in the photos. I would even say the same thing, like if it's a dog or a cat or any kind of critter, a horse, I don't want to stitch through their face. It's just going to look weird. So I would recommend that. Any other questions?
From the Quilted Joy Facebook page, Sherry.
Hey, Sherry.
She's heard that you're not to use wool batting in daily quilts because it can't be washed. Is there a wool that you can use in an everyday or bed quilt?
So you're asking about washable wool. Is there a wool batting that will be kind to be washed? And there are some washable wools out there. Hobbs has a washable wool. Now, washable versus dryable are two separate things, yeah? So I would be cautious about drying that wool, but there's certainly wools out there that can be washed. My recommendation to you before you go invest, because wool is expensive, before you go invest in putting wool into a quilt that you're going to want to wash and dry, would be to get a small piece of that wool batting to audition with and make like a little crib quilt or use panels, and then wash and dry it and see how you feel about it before going and investing in a big piece of wool to put in a utilitarian quilt. My personal preference, I likely would not put it in a utilitarian quilt because I can't trust the other people who I'm around to not toss it in the washing machine and the dryer when I'm not looking. Yeah. So, and certainly I wouldn't give it to any of my kiddos because they're not in a place in their lives where I can give them specialty washing instructions and expect that to happen. So just be cautious about if it's a utilitarian quilt. Do you want to put yourself in the kind of place where you have to think so darn hard when it's time to wash it? In my head, the advantages to the wool are really in the show quilting arena and not so much in the utilitarian arena. So there's my big fat opinion. All right, any other questions that came through?
Yep.
Yep.
Diana would like.
Diana.
She has trouble getting her marking tools that show up on panels. What's your favorite marking tool for panels?
So my favorite marking tool for panels, Diana, really it's not about the panel part, it's about the color part that's being printed on the panel. And my favorite marking tool of all is a really skinny Soline. We have Soline chalk pencils, and those are my favorite. I'm going to see if I can find it on the website and pop it into the chat. So those are my favorite. There's also one by Soline that's got a blue that is also super fantastic. All right, so I found, I will say you're not going to find one color that's going to work for all of the colors typically that you have on a panel quilt. So I just popped one in the chat. That's my favorite for a ceramic lead for white. My other favorite is a dual purple and blue pen right now. That's one's made by Dritz, and it just goes on like absolute butter. But you know, it's blue wash away on one side and it's purple air erase on the other. So just be careful about, you know, stick with one kind. Stick with all washable or all air dry. Don't mix the streams because the way you take one off might set the other one. So just be cautious as you pick your marking devices. So blue and purple, I use that one all the time. Love it, love it, love it. And then my new favorite is, it's a Soline Styla, and it gives me a light blue color. And it is, there, I put it in there. It's again, it's Soline, and it gives me a light blue color that I really love. And then to take them off, the Soline makes this aqua eraser that you just put a little bit of water in, and then it's got like a felt tip to it, and it takes away the water erasable and the air erasable pardon me, markers really easily and quickly. Okay, hopefully, I know that's a lot of choices. By the way, you guys, if you ever want to know like what I like, we only carry stuff I like. So if you're ever interested in like what markers and marking devices I like, just look on the Quilted Joy website and you'll see what I like. Pat says, 2 years ago we bought our used Lenny from you. Hey Pat, took your classes when we got it. Over 200 quilts made since then. You go, Pat. Many for our clients and client quilts. have paid for our investment in little Lenny. Fantastic, Pat. I'm so happy that you're having fun with your Lenny. So every time we use the Lenny, we say thank you for this awesome machine. Oh my goodness, Pat, thank you. Oh, how sweet. Yeah, sweet little Lenny, he's a great machine. So I'm glad you're having fun. I'm glad you're having fun, Pat, and I'm glad you're here. Okay, so Hillary says, hi, Angela. I'm really very new to long arm quilting and find so many issues overwhelming. Oh, wait, have we done
We
this one?
already did that
Oh, sorry, Hillary. Okay, Cheryl. Cheryl says, hi, Angela. How do you do custom ruler work without killing your back? I can do it for a while, but later in the day, my back hurts a lot. Okay, Cheryl, a hydraulic lift is what I would say to you, or a stool that you can change the height of. So either one, like a drafting stool that you can change the height. And then you can kind of perch yourself on that and change how you're standing. So the other thing I would have you look at is, what are you standing on? So if you were standing on a wood floor, even a carpet, I would have you go and get those cushy mats, like the super, super thick ones that Walmart cashiers stand on, the super cushy mats, and put those in front of your frame, because part of your issue might just be that you are standing on a hard surface for a long time and that's causing your body to ache. Part of the issue might be the height you have your table set to. So I like to have my long arm machine so that the belly bar is right above my belly button. So I like the machine to be higher than a lot of people like it, but I love my hydraulic lift because my hydraulic lift can raise the whole enchilada to the sky or lower it down. So sometimes I just need to change the height of the machine ever so slightly, and that will help alleviate the pressure of however I've been standing. The other thing I would have you look at, Cheryl, is where are you stitching? So for example, I have a 30-inch throat Millie. Well, if I try to stitch at the back of that 30-inch throat, one, I have to kind of crank my body to see, and I don't have as much control, so I'm overly tense. So when you look at where you're going to custom quilt with a stand-up machine, I would have you look at like the first 18 to 20 inches and focus your custom quilting in that space. When you're doing ruler work or any kind of custom, just get it closer to your belly, closer to your body. You won't have to crank your neck and crank your body so much to see well, and you'll be able to control it without tensing up quite so much. So there's a number of things I told you there, Cheryl, but I would definitely look at what you're standing on and what you have on your feet. So something with some good support on your feet will also help. But go get those cushy mats. I think I got mine. I think I got it at Uline. Online, and they're super cushy and super nice. Okay, June says, I use pantograph. What's the trick to get the rows close together? I'm having trouble getting them close enough. I do the needle in at the highest point in advance, but still too big of a gap. June, I would want to be sure that whatever pantograph you're using has a ghost row printed on it, and that you're using a ghost row, so it's typically a light gray, and that you're using that light gray row to advance, to use when you advance the quilt, because that light gray row, that ghost row, is what will give you the proper gap between the rows. So what you're describing, there's something off about how you're advancing. You're missing some kind of step in there, because the pantograph should dictate your gap. If the gap doesn't look like what's printed on the pantograph, there's some step in your process that we're missing. So that printed ghost row is going to be important to you. If you have a pantograph, by the way, that you're using, June, that doesn't have a printed ghost row, go throw it away, because that's super hard to use. You want to get the modern, and modern isn't the right word because that's a genre, but the more contemporary designed patterns that we love, that are interlocking and have the ghost row printed on them, because they are so much easier to use than the old school style where it's just the line you're gonna sew, and then you got to do math and figure out the gap between the rows. Ugh. Just use the ones that are printed to make the rest of the world easier. Were there any other questions on YouTube?
We had one about the Soline white ceramic.
The white ceramic
She's had a little
Soline?
trouble getting it to work, and wanted to know if you had any tips or tricks to using it.
So the Soline white ceramic, you might try by getting the tip just a little wet and see if that helps. It could be that it's just kind of dried out on the tip. It's a very thin line though, so you've got to think about like what are the colors I'm trying to mark on, and make sure that it's gonna a thin white line is even gonna show up. But that's a really great marker to use. And I did want to show you guys. Check this out. These just walked in the shop. I'm hoping that you can. Do I have it upside down? Is that okay, Kelsey? Okay, so how gorgeous are these? This is a layer cake stack. It's the Nocturnal line that just got released this week from Ginger Bear. It's a Moda. And I am telling you, these are absolutely gorgeous. The whole line is absolutely gorgeous. And then these are, it's a fat 1/8 stack. Do I have it upside down? It's a fat 1/8 stack. All right, so I'm gonna turn it around so you can see the black and white. Do you see the little bunnies?
That's the owl.
Isn't that gorgeous? Oh my gosh, I'm in love with this whole line. Here, I'll see if I can kind of fan it out because there's one in here. I don't want to mess it up. There are these little owls. Can you see the little owls? So stinking cute. This whole line, just gorgeous color palette, and a whole fat 1/8 stack, as well as the layer cake from Ginger Bear. Just gorgeous. We have these on the website if you're interested. I'm in love with them, especially all of the little, there's little foxes and bunny rabbits, and they're just adorable. So that's a new thing that just came into the shop. So I hope that you check those out, and maybe I'll put a link there in the chat. All right, do we have any other questions that came in? All right, well, you guys, I'm gonna pop the Ginger Bear, the layer cake. I'll pop that in the chat so that you can hop over and take a look at them. And then I hope you guys have a happy Thanksgiving. We are gonna have the family over, so all of my relatives have had the shot. They've all been boosted, and we're finally gonna get everybody together. I haven't seen everybody together in a couple years, and I'm in charge of the turkey. Have not made a turkey before, so hopefully it'll go fine. I've yet to thaw the turkey. Probably should start to do that. Not yet. No. I mean, it's not I need to do some reading and research, obviously, but I'm in charge of the turkey, and I'm in charge of the macaroni and cheese, and my son Luke tells me I'm in charge of the pumpkin bread, and my daughter Emily says I'm in charge of the roasted beets. I haven't yet heard from Nicholas. I'm not sure what he thinks I'm in charge of, but that is what's going on at my house for Thanksgiving. So I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving as well, and I will see you in the clubhouse and on our Facebook page, Instagram, and YouTube. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye!